The distant thunder of hooves was the only warning Zara Jenkins had before the crowd gathered outside her weathered homestead at the edge of Petaluma, California. It was the spring of 1872, and as the dust cleared, she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, positioning herself firmly on the porch steps as a human barrier between the approaching mob and the 7 children huddled behind her in the doorway. "We've had enough of your charity cases, Mrs. Jenkins," shouted Burton Wilkes, the town banker whose paunch strained against his waistcoat buttons. "This town ain't a refuge for every stray child in the territory." Zara lifted her chin, her green eyes flashing with defiance despite the fatigue etched across her face. At 32, the widow's once vibrant copper hair was already streaked with silver at the temples, but her resolve remained undiminished. "These children have nowhere else to go, Mr. Wilkes. Would you rather see them starving on the streets or working in those mines where children half their size die every month? It ain't natural for one woman to raise so many that ain't even hers," called Martha Redmond from behind the safety of her husband's shoulder. "It ain't decent." Zara felt 6-year-old Annie clutch at her skirts. Behind her, 10-year-old Thomas, the oldest boy, stepped forward protectively beside his adoptive mother. The other children, Sarah, William, Joseph, Lily, and baby Rebecca, remained partially hidden in the shadows of the doorway. "I don't see how my family is any of your concern," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "We keep to ourselves and don't ask for charity." "That's the problem right there," said Wilkes, his jowls quivering with indignation. "You call them family when everyone knows none of them are your blood. It ain't right, collecting orphans like some folks collect stray cats." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "My taxes shouldn't be paying for a school teacher who wastes time with orphans who'll amount to nothing," called someone from the back. "The drought's been hard enough without feeding extra mouths that aren't even kin," added another. Zara squared her shoulders. "My teaching salary covers our needs, and what it doesn't, my seamstress work makes up for. We grow our own vegetables, and for now, maybe," interrupted Wilkes. "But what about when you can't manage, when you're too old or too sick? Then what? Then they become the town's burden." "I suggest you all return to your homes," Zara said firmly. "These children have done nothing to deserve your scorn." The crowd pressed closer, and Zara felt a flutter of genuine fear. She had faced disapproval before, but never such open hostility. 4 years ago, when she'd first taken in orphaned Sarah after the influenza epidemic that claimed her husband James, the town had been sympathetic. But as more children found their way to her door, some abandoned, others orphaned by disease or mining accidents, the whispers had begun. Just as the tension seemed ready to snap, the sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the afternoon air. The crowd parted reluctantly as a tall figure on a dusty Palomino stallion rode between them and the porch where Zara stood. The rider dismounted in one fluid movement, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. Beneath the wide brim of a black Stetson, his face was sun-bronzed and weathered, with piercing blue eyes that swept over the crowd before settling on Zara. A sudden hush fell as people recognized the newcomer. "Elijah Vaughn," someone whispered, and the name rippled through the gathering. Elijah. Zara felt the air leave her lungs. She hadn't seen him in nearly 6 years, not since before she'd married James Jenkins. The legendary tracker and former Union scout had vanished from Petaluma after the war, his name occasionally surfacing in stories of frontier justice and wild adventures further east. He looked older now, a scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there before, but the intensity of his gaze remained unchanged as he turned to face the crowd. "What seems to be the problem here?" His voice was low, controlled, but carried an unmistakable edge of danger. "This ain't your concern, Vaughn," Wilkes blustered, though he took an involuntary step backward. "Town business. Is threatening a woman and her children town business these days?" Elijah's hand rested casually near the holstered Colt at his hip. "They ain't her children," someone called out. She's collected them like trinkets, 7 of them. It ain't natural. Elijah's gaze never wavered from Wilkes as he spoke, his voice carrying easily across the yard. They are my family. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Zara herself could scarcely believe what she'd heard. "What are you talking about, Vaughn?" Wilkes demanded. "You've been gone for years. Everyone knows these are orphans she's taken in. My kin," Elijah continued, unmoved. "My sister's children, my cousin's boy, family, and Mrs. Jenkins has been caring for them in my absence." The lie flowed smoothly, his expression giving nothing away. "I've returned to settle here and provide for them properly." He turned slightly, catching Zara's wide-eyed stare. Something passed between them, a silent plea for her to play along, perhaps, or something deeper that stirred memories best left buried. "Is this true, Mrs. Jenkins?" Wilkes asked, his certainty faltering. Before Zara could answer, little Annie piped up from behind her skirts. "Uncle Elijah." She cried with a child's perfect intuition for opportunity. She darted forward and was swept up into Elijah's arms in one smooth motion. "Hello, little one," he said softly, his hard expression softening as he looked into the child's face. Then, to the crowd, "I've been away too long. But I'm back now, and I expect my family to be treated with respect." The gathered townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, many avoiding his direct gaze. Elijah Vaughn's reputation as a deadly shot and fearless tracker during the war had become almost mythical in his absence. "I suggest you all head home," he continued, setting Annie down gently but keeping a protective hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Jenkins and I have family matters to discuss." Reluctantly, the crowd began to disperse, though Wilkes lingered, his face flushed with thwarted authority. "This isn't over, Vaughn. If they're truly your kin, then you'd best make it official and proper. This town has standards." "So do I," Elijah replied evenly. "And harassing women and children doesn't meet them." When the last of the townspeople had disappeared down the dusty road, Zara found her voice at last. "Elijah Vaughn, I never thought I'd see you again." "Neither did I," he admitted, removing his hat and running a hand through hair that was longer than she remembered, streaked with premature silver at the temples that matched her own. "Looks like I arrived just in time. Why did you lie to them?" She asked quietly, aware of the children's curious eyes upon them. "Was I supposed to stand by and watch them threaten you?" He glanced at the children gathered on the porch, his expression unreadable. "We should talk privately," Zara nodded, turning to the oldest boy. "Thomas, take the others inside and start on those lessons I set out this morning. I'll be in shortly." "Yes, madam," Thomas replied, eyeing Elijah with undisguised curiosity before herding the younger children inside. Once they were alone, Zara crossed her arms, studying the man she'd once known so well. "You've put us in quite a position, Elijah. What happens when they discover you lied about being related to these children?" "I don't plan on them discovering anything," he replied. "I'm staying. She echoed, disbelief evident in her voice. "For how long?" "As long as necessary." He looked toward the house, then back at her. "I heard about James. I'm sorry, Zara." The genuine sympathy in his voice caught her off guard. "It's been 4 years now. And since then, you've been collecting children." There was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity. "I haven't been collecting them," she said, bristling slightly. "Each one came to me through circumstances no child should face. What was I supposed to do, turn them away?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You haven't changed, Zara Jenkins, still fighting battles most would walk away from." "Why are you really here, Elijah?" she asked, suddenly tired. After all this time, he was silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon before returning to her face. "I came back for many reasons, but right now it seems you need an ally and I'm offering to be one. By pretending to be their uncle, the town won't believe it for long. They'll believe what they see," he said simply. "And what they'll see is me helping you with these children, contributing to this household, becoming part of this family at least as far as appearances go." Zara shook her head, a humorless laugh escaping her. You always did have the most audacious plans, but these are children's lives, Elijah. Not some adventure or challenge to be conquered. I'm well aware of that, he said, his voice hardening slightly. I've seen enough suffering to last several lifetimes. If I can prevent more of it, I will. She studied him, trying to reconcile the young man she'd known with this harder, more weathered version. The children will have questions. Then we'll give them answers, carefully chosen ones. He glanced toward the house again. Will you introduce me properly? I should know their names at least if I'm to be their uncle. Despite her reservations, Zara found herself nodding. Whatever Elijah's reasons for returning, his presence had dispersed the angry mob, and for that alone she was grateful. Come inside then, she said, turning toward the house. It seems you have a family to meet. As they crossed the threshold together, Zara couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into and why, after all these years, Elijah Vaughn had chosen this moment to ride back into her life. Inside the modest two-story house, the children had arranged themselves around the worn kitchen table, pretending to focus on their lessons but clearly bursting with curiosity. 7 pairs of eyes looked up as Zara and Elijah entered. Children, Zara began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. This is Mr. Elijah Vaughn. He's an old friend who's come to help us for a while. Are you really our uncle? Asked William, the 8-year-old whose serious demeanor belied his young age. Elijah removed his hat, hanging it on a peg by the door with an easy familiarity that suggested he'd done the same many times before in many places. Not by blood, he answered honestly, his eyes meeting Zara's briefly. But family isn't always about blood, is it? Zara felt a surprising rush of gratitude that he hadn't continued the lie in private. Mr. Vaughn helped us with those people outside, she explained. Sometimes, when people don't understand a situation, it helps to give them a simple explanation they can accept. You mean you lied to them, said Thomas bluntly, a protective edge to his voice. I did, Elijah admitted, pulling out a chair and sitting down at the table with them. To protect all of you, sometimes the truth is a luxury good people can't afford. Are you a good person? Asked Sarah, the 9-year-old who had been the first to join Zara's household after James died. A shadow crossed Elijah's face. I try to be, he answered after a moment. I haven't always succeeded. He was very brave in the war, Zara found herself saying. And he's traveled all over the frontier. Have you killed people? Joseph, the 7-year-old with a perpetually runny nose, asked with the horrifying directness of children. Joseph? Zara admonished. It's all right, Elijah said quietly. Yes, I have, during the war and after. Never anyone who didn't deserve it, but that's not something I'm proud of. Did you know my pa? William asked suddenly. He died in a mine collapse up north. I'm sorry I didn't, Elijah replied, but I'd like to hear about him if you want to tell me. Why are you helping us? Thomas persisted, still suspicious. Elijah considered the boy for a long moment. Because Mrs. Jenkins is someone I've known for a long time and I respect her greatly, and because what those people were doing wasn't right. Where will you sleep? Little Annie asked pragmatically. We're all full up. A smile tugged at Elijah's lips. I've got a bedroll and I'm used to sleeping under the stars. The barn will do fine for now. The barn's drafty, Zara objected automatically. The old sofa in the sitting room would be better, at least until we figure things out. Elijah nodded his acceptance. I'll need to settle my horse and bring in my gear, and then, if it's all right with Mrs. Jenkins, I'd like to hear all your names and get to know each of you properly. I can help with your horse, William volunteered eagerly. Me too, Joseph chimed in. Zara watched as Elijah stood, a look of mild alarm crossing his face as the 2 boys rushed to his side. Steady now, he said, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. A man's horse is his partner. I'll show you the proper way to tend to him. As the 3 headed toward the door, Elijah paused, looking back at Zara with an unspoken question in his eyes. Go ahead, she said. We'll talk more later. When they'd gone, baby Rebecca began to fuss in her cradle by the stove. Zara lifted the 18-month-old, bouncing her gently on her hip. "Is he really staying with us, Ma?" Thomas asked, still wary. "For now," Zara replied, not quite believing it herself. "He's complicated, but he was right about one thing: we could use an ally in town." "He's handsome," Sarah said with the first hint of a smile. "Like in those story books." Zara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "He's been through a lot, I expect. Don't pester him with too many questions all at once." Through the window, she could see Elijah showing the boys how to unsaddle his palomino, his movements patient and deliberate as he explained each step. For all his hard edges, he seemed at ease with children, something she wouldn't have predicted. Will he make those mean people stay away for good? Lily, the quietest of the children at just 5 years old, asked in a small voice. Zara sighed, stroking the child's dark hair. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we've managed on our own before, and we will again, with or without Mr. Vaughn's help." But as she watched him through the window, Elijah glanced up toward the house, catching her eye with an intensity that made her quickly look away. Whatever his reasons for returning to Petaluma, whatever history lay between them, Zara knew one thing for certain: life with Elijah Vaughn around would not be simple. Later that evening, after the children had been fed, bathed, and tucked into their crowded bedrooms, Zara finally had a moment alone with Elijah. She found him on the porch, whittling a small piece of wood by the light of a kerosene lamp, his large frame somehow managing to look comfortable on the rickety steps. "They're asleep," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill as she settled beside him, leaving a careful distance between them. "They're good kids," he replied, setting aside his carving. "You've done well by them." "I've done what anyone with a conscience would do," she said, though the compliment warmed her. "You still haven't told me why you're really here, Elijah. It's been 6 years." He was silent for a long moment, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. "I've been tracking someone," he finally said. "A man named Cordell Blake. Heard of him?" Zara shook her head. "Should I have?" "No, better if you hadn't." He twisted the knife in his hands, watching the blade catch the lamplight. "He's wanted in 3 states: murder, robbery, bad business. I've been on his trail for almost a year now, and it led you here, to Petaluma, not directly, but I have reason to believe he's headed this way or will be soon." He glanced at her. "I didn't know about your situation until I got to town this morning. Stopped at the saloon, heard some talk about the widow Jenkins and her house full of orphans. Wasn't hard to figure out who they meant." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "This man, is he dangerous to the children?" "Not specifically," Elijah assured her quickly. "But he's dangerous to anyone who crosses him, and now that I'm here." "We might cross him by association," she finished, understanding dawning. "So your offer to help us is genuine," he interrupted. "But yes, partly motivated by wanting to keep an eye on all of you while I'm in the area. I don't expect Blake for at least a couple of weeks based on his patterns. By then, I'd like to have drawn him away from here entirely." "You could have just told me to be cautious and moved on," she pointed out. "Why involve yourself with us at all?" Elijah set the knife and wood aside completely, turning to face her. In the lamplight, the scar along his jawline looked deeper, a pale line against his tanned skin. "When I rode into town and heard about the widow with too many children, I didn't know it was you," he said quietly. "But I knew I needed to see for myself, and then when I found that crowd at your door." He shook his head. "Some things a man can't walk away from, Zara. So it was just coincidence after all this time." His eyes met hers. "I don't believe in coincidence, not anymore." "And how long do you plan to stay? Until you find this man?" "That depends," he said carefully. "On whether I'm welcome, for one thing, and on how things develop here." Zara sighed, looking out at the darkened yard. "The children already seem taken with you, especially the boys. They need a male figure in their lives, I suppose." "And what about you?" he asked, his voice lower. "What do you need, Zara?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken history. 6 years ago, before the war had changed everything, before she'd married James Jenkins out of both affection and practicality, there had been something between her and Elijah, something neither of them had been ready to name. "I need stability for these children," she answered finally. "I need to know they'll be safe and cared for no matter what happens." "Then let me help provide that," he said simply, "at least for now. And when you leave again, what then?" "I don't have all the answers," he admitted, "but I'm here now, offering what I can. Will you accept it?" Zara considered the man beside her the boy she'd once known, now hardened by experiences she could only imagine. Whatever their past, whatever might have been, the present demanded practical decisions. "All right," she said at last, "but we need to be clear with each other. This arrangement is for the children's benefit. Whatever happened between us before was a long time ago," he finished for her. "I understand," she nodded, rising to her feet. "I've left blankets and a pillow on the sofa." "It's not much, but it's more than I've had many nights," he assured her. "Thank you, Zara." As she turned to go inside, he spoke again, his voice stopping her at the door. "For what it's worth, I never forgot, not one day." She didn't turn around, couldn't bear to see his expression. "Good night, Elijah." "Good night, Zara." Inside, she leaned against the closed door, her heart beating too fast. Elijah Vaughn back in her life, sleeping under her roof. The implications were too complex to untangle tonight. Instead, she made her nightly rounds, checking on each sleeping child, Thomas and Joseph sharing one narrow bed, William on a trundle beneath. Sarah and Lily in the small room that had once been a pantry. Annie on a cot in Zara's own room, and baby Rebecca in her cradle nearby. 7 children, each with their own sorrows, each now depending on her and possibly on the complicated man settling onto her sofa downstairs. As she finally lay down in her own bed, Zara stared at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. For better or worse, Elijah Vaughn had ridden back into her life, and nothing would be the same again. Morning arrived with the rooster's crow and the soft patter of small feet outside her bedroom door. Zara dressed quickly, pinning her hair into a simple bun before waking Annie and lifting Rebecca from her cradle. The baby's dark curls were damp with perspiration, her cheeks flushed. "Another tooth coming, little one," Zara murmured, pressing her lips to the child's forehead to check for fever. Slightly warm, but nothing alarming, downstairs, she found an unexpected sight. Elijah at the stove, frying bacon while Sarah and Lily set the table around him. The other children were washing up at the pump outside, visible through the window. "You cook?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Elijah turned, spatula in hand, a hint of amusement in his eyes. 6 years on my own. A man learns or he starves." "He makes the bacon extra crispy, Ma," Sarah informed her seriously. "Just how we like it. And he's teaching me to set the table proper with the forks on the left," added Lily. "Is that so?" Zara settled Rebecca in her high chair, still trying to process the domestic scene before her. "Well, thank you for getting started without me." "Figured you could use the extra sleep," Elijah said, turning back to the stove. "These 2 were up at dawn, watching me from the doorway. Seemed best to put them to work." The back door burst open as the boys tumbled in, faces scrubbed pink and hair slicked down with water. Thomas carried a pail of fresh milk from their single cow. "Mr. Vaughn says he's going to fix the loose boards on the front porch today," William announced. "And then maybe teach us to track animals. After your lessons," Zara reminded them firmly, "you still have schoolwork to complete." "About that," Elijah said, sliding the bacon onto a waiting plate. "I thought I might walk into town with you today, meet some folks properly now that I'm supposedly settling here with family." Zara hesitated. "The school board hasn't been pleased about me bringing the younger children to class with me. They say it's disruptive." "Then I'll watch them while you teach," he offered, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I can continue their lessons here. You teach." The idea was so incongruous with the hardened tracker, she remembered that Zara nearly laughed. "I can read and cipher well enough," he replied, a touch defensive. Learned from my mother before she passed and picked up more during the war. I'm no schoolmarm, but I can keep them learning for a day." Before Zara could respond, Thomas set the milk pail on the counter with more force than necessary. "We don't need him watching us. I've done it before when you had to go to town alone." "You're 10 years old, Thomas," Zara said gently. "It's a lot of responsibility." "I can handle it," the boy insisted, casting a resentful glance at Elijah. Elijah regarded the boy steadily. "I'm sure you can. You've been the man of the house for a while now, haven't you?" Thomas straightened, pride warring with suspicion on his young face. "Since before Joseph and William came, I look after things." "And you've done a fine job," Elijah said with genuine respect. "But even the best men need help sometimes. That's not weakness, it's wisdom." Something in his tone seemed to reach Thomas, who gave a grudging nod before taking his seat at the table. "So it's settled?" Elijah looked to Zara. "You and I will go into town, see the lay of the land, and I'll bring you back to the schoolhouse at midday. The younger ones can stay with me until your teaching day is done." Zara wanted to object, to insist she could handle things as she always had, but practicality won out. "All right," she conceded, "but no tracking lessons until I'm back, reading and figures first." "Yes, madam," Elijah replied with a mock salute that made the children giggle. As they ate breakfast together, a noisy, crowded affair with elbows bumping and constant requests for more bacon, Zara found herself watching Elijah interact with the children. For someone who'd spent years alone on the trail, he showed remarkable patience, listening to their overlapping stories and answering their endless questions with thoughtful consideration. When the meal was finished, Zara supervised the clearing of the table while Elijah went outside to saddle his horse. She was just pinning on her hat when he returned to the kitchen doorway. "Ready when you are," he said. "I thought you might ride double with me, save your feet the walk." The idea of sitting pressed against Elijah on horseback sent an unwelcome flutter through her stomach. "That's not necessary. I walk to town every day." "And today you don't have to," he countered. "Unless you're afraid of a little gossip." The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Zara straightened her spine. "I stopped caring about gossip when I took in my first orphan. Very well, Mr. Vaughn, I'll ride with you." After giving the children their instructions for the morning lessons first, then chores, and minding Thomas until Elijah returned, Zara found herself being lifted effortlessly onto the back of the palomino. Elijah swung up behind her, his chest a solid warmth against her back as he reached around her for the reins. "Hold tight," he murmured close to her ear, and then they were moving, the horses' gait smooth as they headed toward town. The ride was mercifully brief, but long enough for Zara to become acutely aware of Elijah's physical presence, the strength in his arms, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to him. By the time they reached the schoolhouse at the edge of town, her cheeks were flushed from more than just the morning air. "I'll be back at midday," he said, helping her down. "Don't worry about the children, they'll be fine." "It's not the children I'm worried about," she replied, straightening her skirts. "It's the impression we're making. If you're truly staying to help, Elijah, we need to be mindful of appearances." His expression sobered. "You're right. What would you suggest?" Zara considered for a moment. "The story you gave yesterday about being related to the children, it's too easily disproven. But if you were an old family friend, someone who knew James and has come to help his widow, that might be more believable. And closer to the truth," he acknowledged. "All right then. James Jenkins' old war buddy, come to help his friend's widow and her charges. Simple enough." "Nothing about you is simple, Elijah," she said softly, "but it will have to do." As her students began arriving for the day, Zara watched Elijah ride back toward her homestead, a strange mixture of trepidation and hope settling in her chest. Whatever his ultimate purpose in Petaluma, for now, she had an ally and her children had a protector. That would have to be enough. The morning passed in a familiar rhythm of reading lessons and arithmetic, but Zara found her thoughts repeatedly drifting to her homestead, wondering how Elijah was managing with the younger children. When the lunch bell finally rang and her students scattered to eat their packed meals, she stepped outside to find Elijah already waiting, leaning against a hitching post with casual grace. "How did it go?" she asked, approaching him. "Better than expected," he replied. "Your Thomas is sharp as a tack helped with the little one's lessons. Rebecca's got a tooth coming in, making her fussy, but we managed. And the others?" Sarah's a natural with figures. Lily barely speaks but draws beautifully. "William and Joseph would rather be outdoors, but they settled down when I promised to show them some tracking signs this afternoon." He straightened, looking rather pleased with himself. "I fixed the loose porch boards and mended that gate hinge that was hanging by a thread." Zara blinked in surprise. "All that in one morning? I work fast," he said with a slight shrug. "Your place needs a lot of attention, Zara. How long has that roof been leaking in the northwest corner?" She felt a flush of embarrassment. "Since last winter." "I've been saving to hire someone, but there's always something more urgent: food, shoes, medicine." Elijah's expression softened. "I'll take a look at it tomorrow. Might be able to patch it well enough to last until you can afford a proper repair." "You don't have to do all this," she said, uncomfortable with both his help and his scrutiny of her struggles. "I know I don't have to." His voice was gentle. "I want to." Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door opened behind her and Mrs. Holbrook, the head of the school board, emerged. Her pinched expression soured further at the sight of Elijah. "Mrs. Jenkins, I see your visitor has returned, Mrs. Holbrook," Zara greeted politely. "May I properly introduce Mr. Elijah Vaughn? He's an old friend of my late husband's, come to help with the children for a while." "Is that so?" The older woman's gaze swept over Elijah with undisguised suspicion. "Yesterday I heard he was claiming to be their uncle." "A misunderstanding," Elijah said smoothly, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "In the heat of the moment, I may have overstated the relationship. James Jenkins and I served together briefly during the war. When I heard of his passing, I felt it my duty to check on his widow." 4 years later, Mrs. Holbrook's eyebrows rose skeptically. "News travels slowly on the frontier, madam," he replied. "And I've been tracking various individuals for the government, not work that allows for social calls." The mention of government work seemed to give the woman pause. "I see. Well, Mrs. Jenkins, the afternoon bell will be ringing shortly. I trust you'll be continuing with today's lessons." "Of course," Zara assured her. "Mr. Vaughn just came to inform me about the children at home." When Mrs. Holbrook had retreated inside, Zara released a tense breath. "That woman has been looking for reasons to dismiss me since I took in the third child. Says it divides my attention from my proper students." "Does it?" Elijah asked, genuinely curious. "Perhaps sometimes," she admitted. "But I'm a better teacher for having raised these children. I understand more about how different minds work, how to reach students others might give up on." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'll head back then. Any instructions for the afternoon?" "Just keep them safe," she said. "And Elijah, thank you." A rare, genuine smile transformed his face, making him look years younger. "You're welcome, Zara." As he rode away, Zara found herself watching longer than she should have, remembering a younger version of that same smile from days that seemed a lifetime ago. When school dismissed for the day, Zara walked home rather than waiting for Elijah to return. The 2-mile journey gave her time to think, to prepare herself for whatever new dynamic awaited at the homestead. She had just reached the final bend in the road when she heard children's laughter floating on the afternoon breeze. The scene that greeted her as the house came into view stopped her in her tracks. In the front yard, Elijah was demonstrating something to the children, all arranged in a semicircle around him. Even Thomas seemed captivated, his usual wariness temporarily forgotten as he watched Elijah's hands molding something from a pile of soil. "See here," she heard Elijah saying as she approached. "These 3 toes pointing forward and this one back. That's a bird track. But this one with 4 toes all pointing forward, that's more likely a raccoon." "What about wolves?" William asked eagerly. "Can you track wolves?" I can track just about anything that leaves a print, Elijah replied. But wolves are smart, they know how to hide their trails sometimes. Like the bad men you chase, Joseph asked. A shadow crossed Elijah's face. Something like that. He looked up then, spotting Zara at the edge of the yard. Something in his expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked, tugged at her heart. Mrs. Jenkins is home, he announced, standing and brushing dirt from his hands. Time to show her what else we accomplished today. The children scrambled up, rushing to Zara with excited chatter. Sarah proudly displayed a row of even stitches she'd practiced on a scrap of fabric. William and Joseph led her to the repaired gate, pointing out their contributions. Lily silently offered a drawing of the house, surprisingly detailed for a 5-year-old. And Thomas helped me patch that leak in the roof, Elijah added, coming up behind them. Boys got a good head for practical work. Thomas stood a little taller at the praise. Mr. Vaughn says I might make a good carpenter someday. Is that so? Zara smiled, touched by the way Elijah had found something to value in each child. Well, that's a fine ambition. Come see the garden. Annie tugged at her hand. We planted more carrots. As she was pulled toward the kitchen garden at the side of the house, Zara glanced back to see Elijah with Rebecca perched comfortably on his hip, the baby contentedly gumming a wooden teething ring that hadn't existed that morning. Did you make that for her? She asked when she returned, nodding toward the smooth wooden ring. Whittled it during her nap, he confirmed. Rubbed it with a bit of honey to soothe her gums. My mother used to do that, Zara said, surprised. How did you know about that remedy? A fleeting sadness crossed his features. My sister had a baby back before the war. I remember my mother doing the same. It was the first personal detail he'd volunteered since his arrival, and Zara found herself hungry for more. I didn't know you had a sister. Had, he emphasized quietly, bouncing Rebecca gently as she began to fuss. Yellow fever took her and the baby both in '59. My mother followed a year later. I'm sorry, Elijah, I didn't know. No reason you should have. He handed the baby to her. This little one's ready for her dinner, I think. The others helped prepare a stew. My contribution was making sure nothing burned while they chopped. That evening, as they all gathered around the table, Zara found herself observing the easy dynamic that had somehow developed in just a day. The children chattered about their activities, each seeking Elijah's approval for their contributions. Even Thomas had thawed considerably, proudly explaining the roof repair technique they'd used. After dinner, as the children washed up and prepared for bed, Zara finally had a moment alone with Elijah on the porch, much like the night before. You're good with them, she said, genuine admiration in her voice. I wouldn't have expected that. Children are honest, he replied simply. They don't hide who they are or what they want. It's refreshing after years of tracking men who lie with every breath. Speaking of tracking, she ventured carefully, this man you're looking for, how dangerous is he, really? Elijah's expression hardened. Dangerous enough that I don't want him anywhere near you or these children. That's why I need to draw him away from here if he does come to Petaluma. And how do you plan to do that? By letting word spread that I've moved on. In a few days, I'll make a show of riding out, then circle back after dark. I'll stay in the old line shack about a mile from here, close enough to keep watch, far enough that Blake won't connect me to this place if he comes looking. Zara frowned. So all this helping with the children, repairing the house, it's just for appearance's sake. Until you can slip away to continue your hunt. That's not what I meant, he said, frustration evident in his voice. I meant that I need to protect you all by making sure Blake doesn't know I care about this place or the people in it. And do you? She challenged. Care, his gaze held her steadily. You know I do. The simple statement hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. The children will be disappointed when you leave, she said finally, even if it's just for show. I'll explain it to them, he promised. And I won't be far. Just need to maintain the ruse for a week or so until I'm sure Blake has either bypassed this area or been apprehended. And after that, when this man is caught or gone, Elijah looked out at the darkening yard, I suppose that depends on whether I'm still welcome here. The children would certainly vote to keep you, she said carefully. And their mother, he asked, his voice lower. Zara felt her heartbeat quicken. Their guardian, she corrected gently, and I'm grateful for your help, Elijah, but we've both changed. Whatever was between us before, I know, he interrupted. Water under the bridge. But maybe something new could, he stopped abruptly, seeming to think better of what he'd been about to say. One day at a time, that's all I'm asking for now. She nodded, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. One day at a time. As they sat in companionable silence, watching the first stars appear, Zara allowed herself to imagine, just briefly, what it might be like to have Elijah Vaughn as a permanent fixture in their lives, a partner in raising these children, a companion through the years ahead. The image was both tempting and terrifying. For tonight, though, it was enough that he was here, that the children were safe, and that for the first time in a very long while, she didn't feel quite so alone. The next 3 days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Elijah rode with Zara to the schoolhouse each morning, returning to the homestead to continue repairs and mind the younger children. By the time Zara walked home each afternoon, another improvement would be visible: the chicken coop reinforced, the well rope replaced, the broken step mended. The children blossomed under his attention. Even baby Rebecca had taken to reaching for him when he entered a room. Thomas, initially the most resistant, now shadowed Elijah constantly, absorbing every lesson on carpentry, horsemanship, and tracking with solemn dedication. On the 4th evening, as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Elijah broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "I need to leave tomorrow," he said quietly. "Make it look like I'm moving on." Though she'd been expecting it, Zara felt a surprising pang of disappointment. "The children will ask questions." "I've thought about that," he replied. "Thought I'd tell them I have business in Sacramento, but I'll be back in a week or so, not a complete lie." "Will you be back?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. He turned to look at her directly. "If you want me to be." The simple statement placed the decision squarely in her hands, and Zara found herself unprepared for the weight of it. "The children would miss you," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked, Zara." She met his gaze, finding an intensity there that made her breath catch. "Yes," she admitted finally. "I want you to come back," something eased in his expression. "Then I will." "But this man you're tracking, Blake," Elijah supplied. "He's dangerous, yes, but I'm close to finding him." "Once I do." "Once you do, what then?" she pressed. "Back to tracking others, another assignment somewhere far from here." He was silent for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that, about what comes after." And I'm tired, Zara," he confessed, his voice dropping. "Tired of tracking killers. Tired of living out of a bedroll. Tired of having no place to call home, no one waiting for me to return." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep inside her. "What are you saying, Elijah?" "I'm saying that maybe, when this is over, I might be looking to put down roots, if there's a place for me." The implications hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to address them directly. "The children would like that," she said softly. "They've grown attached to you already." "And their guardian?" he asked, echoing their earlier conversation. This time Zara didn't deflect. "Their guardian is cautiously optimistic, but also realistic. We have a complicated history, you and I. We were young," he acknowledged. "Too young, maybe, and then the war came." "And you left," she reminded him, without a word. Pain flickered across his features. "I thought it was the right thing to do. Your father made it clear I wasn't welcome, that I had nothing to offer you, and he wasn't wrong. I had no prospects, no future worth speaking of." "You could have let me decide that for myself," she said, old hurt resurfacing. "Instead, I heard from Mrs. Dalloway that you'd enlisted and left town. 2 years without a letter, Elijah, not one word to let me know you were even alive." "I wrote," he said quietly, "every month for the first year. When you never answered, I thought you'd moved on." Zara stared at him in disbelief. "I never received any letters." Understanding dawned on both their faces simultaneously. Your father, Elijah said grimly. He would have intercepted them, she agreed, the pieces falling into place. And by the time I married James, you'd given up on me, he finished. As you should have. The revelation of this decades-old deception left them both silent, contemplating how differently things might have unfolded. It doesn't matter now, Zara said finally. We made our choices. I had 4 good years with James and these children. She gestured toward the darkened house. They're my life now. They could be mine too, Elijah said, so softly she almost didn't hear him. If you'd let them, if you'd let me try to be what they need, what you need. The honesty in his voice, the rawness of the offer, made her throat tighten with emotion. Elijah, you don't need to answer now, he said quickly. Just think about it while I'm gone. She nodded, not trusting her voice. I should turn in, he said, rising from the step. Early start tomorrow if I'm to make a convincing show of leaving. Good night, Elijah, she managed. He paused at the door, looking back at her silhouetted against the night sky. For what it's worth, Zara, I never stopped loving you, not during the war, not during the years after. I just stopped believing I deserved you. Before she could respond, he disappeared inside, leaving her alone with a heart too full of conflicting emotions to name. The next morning brought leaden skies and the promise of rain-fitting weather for departures. Zara thought as she watched Elijah explain his absence to the assembled children at breakfast. But why do you have to go to Sacramento? William demanded, lower lip trembling suspiciously. There's a man there I need to meet, Elijah explained patiently. A man who might know where I can find someone else I've been looking for. The bad man, Joseph asked. Elijah nodded. That's right. Once I find him and make sure he can't hurt anyone else, my job will be done. And then you'll come back, Sarah pressed, voicing the question they all wanted answered. His eyes found Zara's across the table. If I'm welcome, yes, I'll come back. Of course you're welcome, Thomas said unexpectedly. You're family now. The simple declaration from the usually guarded boy brought a suspicious brightness to Elijah's eyes. Thank you, Thomas. That means more than you know. The goodbyes were harder than Zara had anticipated. Each child demanded a hug, even baby Rebecca reaching out her chubby arms from Zara's hip. Thomas stood stoically until Elijah offered a handshake, then impulsively threw his arms around the man's waist. You promised to teach me how to set a proper trap, the boy reminded him, voice muffled against Elijah's shirt. And I will, Elijah assured him, a hand on his shoulder. When I return. Finally, only Zara remained, standing with him by his saddled horse at the edge of the yard, the children watching from the porch. Be careful, she said quietly. This man Blake sounds dangerous. I've faced worse, he replied, checking his saddle cinch. The line shack is stocked with enough supplies for a week. I'll check on you each night after dark. She nodded, suddenly unable to find the right words for this parting. Last night's revelations had shifted something between them, reopened possibilities she'd long thought closed. Elijah, about what you said last night, you don't need to say anything now, he interrupted gently. We have time. Do we? She asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice. He reached out, brushing a strand of copper hair from her cheek with calloused fingers. I believe we do. 6 years is a long time, but some things don't change, Zara. Before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, chaste, brief, but containing a promise that made her heart race. Take care of our family, he said softly. I'll be back before you know it. As he mounted and rode away, the hour echoed in her mind, a word carrying more weight and hope than she'd allowed herself to feel in years. The waiting was the hardest part. Each day, Zara went through the motions of teaching and caring for the children, all while watching the horizon for any sign of danger or of Elijah's return. True to his word, he appeared briefly after nightfall each evening, slipping out of the darkness to report that all was quiet before disappearing again toward the line shack. Their conversations during these brief visits were necessarily limited, focused on practical matters, whether she'd noticed any strangers in town, how the children were faring, if anything needed immediate attention around the homestead. But beneath the practicalities ran an undercurrent of growing connection, of shared purpose, of possibilities neither was quite ready to name. On the fifth night, Elijah didn't come. Zara sat on the porch until well past midnight, straining to hear the soft footfall that had become familiar, the gentle whicker of his horse kept at a distance. Only silence greeted her vigil. By morning, worry had blossomed into fear. She went through the motions of preparing the children for the day, forcing brightness into her voice even as her mind conjured increasingly dire scenarios. "You're worried about Mr. Vaughn," Thomas observed as she absently poured coffee into his milk cup instead of her own. Zara startled, quickly correcting her mistake. "I'm just tired, Thomas. He didn't come last night," the boy persisted. "I always hear him talking to you on the porch." She should have known the perceptive child would notice. "Mr. Vaughn can take care of himself," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Now finish your breakfast. We need to leave for school soon." The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. When the final bell rang, Zara impulsively decided to take a detour on her walk home, veering toward the lined shack where Elijah had been staying. She told herself it was merely prudent to check he might be ill or injured and unable to travel the distance to the homestead. The small cabin came into view as she crested a rise, tucked against a stand of pines for shelter. No smoke rose from the chimney, no horse grazed nearby. As she approached cautiously, the stillness confirmed what she already suspected. Elijah hadn't been there for at least a day. Inside, his few belongings remained bedroll neatly laid out, provisions carefully organized on the crude shelf. Only his weapons and saddlebags were missing, suggesting he'd left deliberately rather than been taken by force. Relief mingled with renewed worry as Zara headed back toward home. At least there were no signs of violence, no indication he'd been harmed. But his unexplained absence could only mean he was pursuing Blake, perhaps had spotted the man and given chase without time to warn her. The children were subdued that evening, picking up on Zara's tension despite her efforts to hide it. After they were finally asleep, she returned to her porch vigil, a loaded shotgun across her lap, a precaution Elijah had insisted upon during his absence. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sometime after midnight brought her instantly alert, the shotgun raised and ready. But it was Elijah who emerged from the darkness, his horse moving at a weary walk, both rider and mount showing signs of hard travel. "It's just me," he called softly, recognizing the shotgun's silhouette. "Don't shoot." Relief flooded her as she lowered the weapon. "Where have you been? I was worried sick." He dismounted stiffly, leading his horse to the hitching post before joining her on the porch. In the faint moonlight, she could see a darkened streak across his left cheek, dried blood. "You're hurt," she said, rising quickly. "It's nothing," he assured her. "Just a graze. Blake's aim isn't what he thinks it is." "You found him?" Her heart raced with a mixture of relief and renewed fear. Elijah nodded grimly. "Found him, tracked him, cornered him in that abandoned sawmill outside of town. He got off a shot before I could take him in." "Take him in," she repeated. "You mean he's alive," Elijah confirmed, trussed up like a Christmas turkey in the sheriff's office in town. "I've been there since yesterday, making statements, sending telegrams to the federal marshal's office." He rubbed a hand across his face, fatigue evident in every line of his body. "It's over, Zara. He'll stand trial for his crimes in Sacramento." The full import of his words sank in slowly. "So your job is done." "It is." A tired smile touched his lips. "I told the marshal's office this was my last assignment. I'm retired as of today." Hope fluttered in her chest, but she contained it carefully. "And now?" Instead of answering directly, he reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing a folded document that he handed to her. In the dim light, she could just make out the official letterhead of the land office. "What is this?" "The deed to the Jackson property," he said. "The one that borders yours to the east. It came up for auction while I was in town." Zara stared at him in confusion. "You bought land?" "Here, I did." His eyes held hers steadily. "I told you I was looking to put down roots. But why that particular property?" It has a good house, he said simply. Needs work, but it's solid. Has a better barn than yours, more grazing land, room to expand. Expand what, this family, he said softly, if you'll have me. The directness of his statement took her breath away. Elijah. I know it's sudden, he continued quickly. And I know we have a lot to learn about each other again, but these past days with you and the children, it's the first time in years I've felt like I belong somewhere with someone. The children have grown attached to you, she acknowledged, her heart pounding, and I to them, he said. But it's you, Zara, it's always been you. He moved closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek gently. I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance to show you that I can be the man you need, the father these children deserve. Zara found herself leaning into his touch, years of loneliness and struggle making the comfort of his presence all the more powerful. The town will talk, she whispered. A smile tugged at his lips. Let them, we know the truth. And what is the truth, Elijah? His gaze held hers, unwavering. That I love you, that I never stopped loving you, that if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you and these children. The simple declaration, spoken without artifice or hesitation, broke through the last of her carefully constructed defenses. Tears filled her eyes as she covered his hand with her own. I've been alone for so long, she admitted, responsible for so many. The thought of leaning on someone else, of trusting someone else with them with my heart, it terrifies me. I know, he said gently, and I wouldn't ask if I weren't certain. These children need a father, Zara, and you. He hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty. You deserve a partner. Someone to share the burden. Someone to love you the way you deserve to be loved. The sincerity in his voice, the steadiness of his gaze, the way he'd already begun to transform their lives in just these few short days, it all combined to create a certainty Zara hadn't felt in years. Yes, she whispered, the single word carrying the weight of future promises. His eyes widened slightly as if he hadn't quite expected her agreement. Yes, she nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Yes, I'll give us that chance. Yes, these children need a father. Yes, I want you to stay. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise after the longest night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down until his lips met hers in a kiss that was both a homecoming and a new beginning, gentle at first, then deepening as years of separation and longing melted away. When they finally parted, both breathless, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. I should have come back sooner. You're here now, she said simply. That's what matters. A soft sound from the doorway made them both turn. Thomas stood there in his nightshirt, watching them with solemn eyes. You came back, the boy said to Elijah, his voice carefully neutral. I did, Elijah confirmed, straightening but keeping one arm around Zara's waist. And I'm staying if that's all right with you. Thomas considered this seriously. For how long? For good, Elijah replied. If you'll all have me. The boy's eyes flicked to Zara, seeking confirmation. She nodded, feeling a strange mixture of nervousness and certainty. I asked Mrs. Jenkins if I could become part of this family permanently, Elijah explained, to help care for all of you, to be. He hesitated, clearly not wanting to overstep, to be a father to you if you'd want that. Thomas was silent for a long moment, his young face working through complicated emotions. Would you still teach me about tracking and trapping? A smile tugged at Elijah's lips. Every day if you want. And would you make Ma smile like that all the time? The directness of the question betrayed how much the perceptive child had noticed. I'll certainly try my best, Elijah promised solemnly. Thomas nodded once, decision made. Then I think it's a good idea. He paused, then added pragmatically, Joseph kicks in his sleep. You probably shouldn't share our room. A startled laugh escaped Zara as Elijah's ears reddened visibly even in the dim light. That won't be necessary, she assured Thomas quickly. Mr. Vaughn has purchased the Jackson property next door. He'll be our neighbor while we figure things out. The boy seemed satisfied with this arrangement. Good, the roof leaks there too. You can fix it like you fixed ours. With that practical assessment, he turned and padded back inside, leaving the adults trying to contain their amusement. "Out of the mouths of babes," Elijah murmured, shaking his head. "Smart boy." "He is," Zara agreed, sobering slightly. "They all are in their own ways." "They've been through so much, Elijah. They need stability, consistency." "They'll have it," he promised. "We'll take this as slowly as they need, as you need." She nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Stay tonight," she said impulsively. "On the sofa," she clarified quickly. "You're exhausted and it's too late to ride to the Jackson place. The children will want to see you in the morning. Are you sure?" he asked, searching her face. "I'm sure." She took his hand, leading him toward the door. "Welcome home, Elijah." The word home settled between them like a promise, the first of many to come. The children's reaction to Elijah's permanent return was everything Zara might have hoped for. Over breakfast the next morning, when she carefully explained that Mr. Vaughn would be living nearby and becoming part of their family, the table erupted in cheers. Even baby Rebecca joined in, banging her spoon enthusiastically against her high chair. "Are you getting married?" Sarah asked practically, her 9-year-old mind grasping the implications immediately. Zara felt her cheeks warm as she exchanged glances with Elijah. "We haven't discussed that yet, Sarah. For now, Mr. Vaughn will be living at the Jackson place and helping us here." "But you're sweet on each other," the girl persisted, her tone matter of fact. "I saw you holding hands." "Yes," Elijah answered before Zara could formulate a response. "I am very sweet on Mrs. Jenkins, have been since we were younger than Thomas." This frank admission sent the children into fits of giggles and dramatically disgusted groans, depending on their ages. "Can we help fix up your new house?" William asked eagerly. "Thomas says the roof leaks." "I'd welcome the help," Elijah replied seriously. "It'll take all of us to make it a proper home." "But first," Zara interjected firmly, "there's school and chores. Nothing changes about our responsibilities." Despite her practical reminder, everything had changed. As spring blossomed into summer, the Jackson property gradually transformed under Elijah's skilled hands and the children's enthusiastic assistance. Weekends found the entire family working together, repairing fences, patching the roof, planting an expanded garden that stretched across both properties. The two homesteads began to function as one larger farm, with the children moving freely between them. Elijah taught the boys to fish in the creek that ran along the eastern boundary, while Sarah and Lily helped Zara preserve the bounty from their expanded garden. Even little Rebecca thrived, taking her first tottering steps between the two houses, symbolic of the bridge being built between their formerly separate lives. Town attitudes shifted gradually as well. Seeing Elijah Vaughn, whose capture of the notorious Blake had made headlines as far away as San Francisco settled peacefully among them, lent a new respectability to Zara's unusual family. When he began accompanying them all to church each Sunday, sitting proudly with the children arrayed around him, the last whispers of impropriety faded away. By midsummer, Elijah had completed the basic repairs on the Jackson house, creating a comfortable if modest home. Yet he still spent most evenings on Zara's porch, talking long into the night after the children were asleep, gradually relearning each other's hearts and minds, building the foundation for something deeper than their youthful attachment had ever been. It was on such an evening, with fireflies dancing in the yard and the scent of late roses drifting from the bush beside the steps, that Elijah finally broached the subject they'd been circling for months. "I think it's time we talked about making this arrangement permanent," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous tapping of his fingers against the porch rail. Zara looked up from her mending, her heart suddenly racing. "What exactly did you have in mind?" He met her gaze directly. "Marriage. A proper joining of our lives and these properties, making these children legally ours, both of ours." Though she'd been expecting this conversation eventually, the reality of it still took her breath away. "The children would be thrilled," she said carefully. "I'm not asking for the children's sake," he replied gently. "Though I love them as my own already, I'm asking for us, Zara, because I love you, because I want to build a life with you, grow old with you." She set her mending aside, buying time to calm her racing heart. "It's a big step, Elijah." "It is," he agreed, "and if you're not ready, I'll wait, but I wanted you to know my intentions." "My practical, straightforward Elijah," she said with a soft smile, "always stating your case plainly." "Is that a fault?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "It's one of the things I love about you," she replied, the admission easier than she'd expected. "That and your patience with the children, your dedication to making a home for us all, the way you look at me when you think I don't notice." His eyes darkened at her words. "And how do I look at you?" "Like I'm the sunrise after the longest night," she said softly. "Like coming home after years of wandering. Because that's exactly what you are to me," he confirmed, moving to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "So, Zara Jenkins, will you marry me, make a family with me officially? Let me love you and these children for the rest of my days." Looking into his earnest blue eyes, Zara found all her careful reservations melting away. The past months had shown her a side of Elijah she'd only glimpsed in their youth: his steadiness, his integrity, his capacity for tenderness. He'd proven himself not with words but with daily actions, building a foundation of trust and shared purpose stronger than any she could have imagined. "Yes," she said simply, her heart full. "Yes, Elijah Vaughn, I will marry you." His smile was like the breaking of dawn as he rose, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. The kiss they shared was a promise, a commitment, a preview of the lifetime they would build together. A soft giggle from the doorway interrupted them. They turned to find all 7 children watching with expressions ranging from Annie's delight to Thomas's grudging approval. "Were you eavesdropping?" Zara asked, trying and failing to sound stern. "Sarah said you might be kissing," William explained matter-of-factly. "We wanted to see." "Well," Elijah asked, his arm still around Zara's waist. "What's the verdict? Are you going to be our pa for real now?" Joseph asked hopefully. Elijah's expression softened as he looked at the assembled children, this unlikely family that had somehow become his own. "If you'll have me, yes. All of us." Thomas clarified, his young shoulders straight, still the protector of his siblings. "All of you," Elijah confirmed. "Every last one. Papers filed properly at the courthouse so no one can ever question that you belong to us, to both of us." The boy nodded once, satisfied. "Good, Ma needs help." "And you make her smile." "That I do," Elijah agreed, glancing down at Zara with such naked affection that she felt her cheeks warm. "Now it's well past bedtime for all of you, back to sleep." With minimal grumbling, the children retreated inside, though Sarah lingered long enough to stage whisper. "I think you should wear blue for the wedding, Ma. It matches Mr. Vaughn's eyes." When they were alone again, Elijah chuckled. "Nothing gets past that one." "None of them," Zara agreed. "They see everything, understand more than we give them credit for. They've approved the match, it seems." "They love you," she said simply. "As do I." The words, so long unspoken, felt right, natural, and true. Elijah's eyes darkened as he pulled her closer again. "Say it again," he murmured. "I love you, Elijah Vaughn," she obliged, the declaration freeing something long bound inside her. "I think I always have." Their kiss this time was deeper, unhurried, a promise of all the nights to come when they would no longer need to part at the porch steps. The wedding took place in late August, a simple ceremony in the white clapboard church where they'd once sat in separate pews as teenagers, stealing glances when they thought no one was looking. Now they stood proudly before the altar, surrounded by their children and a community that had gradually come to accept and even embrace their unconventional family. Zara wore blue, as Sarah had suggested, a simple but elegant dress that brought out the copper highlights in her hair and matched the sky color of Elijah's eyes. He wore a new black suit, his usual trail-worn appearance replaced by a cleaned-up elegance that made several of the town's unmarried ladies sigh audibly. The children participated fully in the ceremony, Thomas standing solemnly beside Elijah as his best man, Sarah serving as Zara's maid of honor, the younger ones forming a procession that made up in enthusiasm what it lacked in precision. Even baby Rebecca had a role carried by Lily down the aisle, a basket of rose petals clutched in her chubby fist. "I take you, Zara Jenkins, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Elijah's voice rang clear and steady in the packed church. "To love and cherish, to protect and provide for, until death parts us. I take you, Elijah Vaughn, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Zara responded, her heart so full she could scarcely believe it wouldn't burst. "To love and honor, to stand beside through all of life's joys and sorrows, until death parts us." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the children cheered louder than anyone, their joy infectious as it spread through the congregation. Even Mrs. Holbrook was seen dabbing at her eyes, her previous disapproval apparently forgotten in the face of such evident happiness. The celebration continued at their newly joined homestead, with tables set up under the oak trees and enough food to feed half the county. The townsfolk who had once looked askance at Zara's growing brood now offered genuine congratulations and thoughtful gifts, preserved fruits, hand-stitched linens, practical items for their expanding household. As the afternoon waned into evening, Elijah found Zara watching the children playing a rowdy game of tag with some of their schoolmates. "Happy, Mrs. Vaughn?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. The new name sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she admitted, leaning into his solid warmth. "You know," he said conversationally, "that house of mine is awfully empty with just me in it." She looked up at him, reading the invitation in his eyes. "Is that so?" "It is," he confirmed. "And this one is getting rather crowded, what with 7 growing children." "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Vaughn?" His smile held a hint of mischief. "That perhaps it's time to connect the 2 properties more directly, a covered walkway between the houses, perhaps. The children could have more space spreading between both, and you and I." He let the implication hang in the air between them, "could have a measure of privacy," she finished, her cheeks warming. "Something like that," he agreed, his voice dropping lower. "Starting tonight." The promise in his tone made her breath catch. "The children have been thoroughly briefed by Thomas," he assured her. "They understand that married people need their own house sometimes. They'll stay here tonight with Mrs. Peterson keeping an eye on them. And we'll be just across the way if needed." The thoughtfulness of his planning touched her deeply. "You've thought of everything." "I've had months to plan, Zara," he said simply. "Months of loving you and waiting for this day." As the celebration wound down and twilight deepened into dusk, they said their goodnights to the children, a process involving multiple hugs, reassurances, and promises to return first thing in the morning. When the last good night had been said, Elijah took Zara's hand and led her across the connecting path to what was now their second home. On the porch he paused, then swept her into his arms in a smooth motion that made her laugh in surprise. "Threshold," he explained with mock seriousness. "Tradition must be observed." Inside, she found the house transformed from its previous bachelor simplicity. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, a vase of late summer flowers graced the table, and the bedroom beyond held a new bed frame that she recognized as Elijah's handiwork, piled with quilts and pillows that the girls must have helped arrange. "When did you do all this?" she asked, touched by the effort. "Been working on it bits at a time," he admitted. "Wanted it to be perfect for you." "It is," she assured him, turning in his arms to face him fully. "Everything is." As his lips found hers in the soft lamplight, Zara felt the last pieces of her life falling into place, the loneliness of widowhood replaced by partnership, the struggle of raising 7 children alone giving way to shared joy and responsibility, the caution of her heart yielding to the certainty of belonging. In Elijah's arms, she had found her home at last. Epilogue: 5 years later, the spring fair in Petaluma was in full swing. the town square transformed by colorful bunting and the sounds of laughter and music. Zara Vaughn stood in the shade of an oak tree, watching with pride as Sarah, now 14, accepted a blue ribbon for her quilt from the county judge. "That's 3 ribbons for our family today," came Elijah's voice as he approached, balancing plates of pie in each hand. "Thomas just took first place in the marksmanship competition for the under-16 category." "Of course he did," Zara said with a smile, accepting the offered dessert. "He had the best teacher." Elijah's chest puffed slightly at the compliment. At 41, the former tracker had settled comfortably into family life. The dangerous edge that once defined him softened, though not entirely gone, as anyone who threatened his family quickly discovered. "Where are the others?" she asked, scanning the crowded fairgrounds. "William and Joseph are helping Mr. Peterson set up for the horse race. Lily's at the art exhibition, her drawing got an honorable mention. Annie's with her friends at the ring toss." He paused, glancing around. "And I believe our youngest 2 are with Rebecca by the duck pond." Zara's gaze followed his toward the small pond at the edge of the grounds, where 9-year-old Rebecca was indeed watching over her younger siblings with the seriousness only an eldest child could muster. 4-year-old James Elijah Vaughn was attempting to skip stones across the water's surface, his dark hair so like his father's falling into eyes that were pure Jenkins green. Beside him, 2-year-old Elizabeth Rose toddled determinedly after a family of ducklings, her copper curls bouncing with each step. "We should rescue Rebecca before Lizzie ends up in the pond," Zara suggested, already moving in that direction. Elijah fell into step beside her, his hand finding the small of her back in the casual, possessive gesture that still sent warmth through her after 5 years of marriage. "She's doing fine. Has your stubborn streak, that one." "And your fearlessness," Zara countered, watching as their youngest daughter squatted at the pond's edge, completely focused on the swimming ducks. "Ma, Pa," James spotted them and came running, his small face alight with excitement. "I skipped a rock 3 times, Beck showed me how." "Well done, partner," Elijah said, sweeping the boy into his arms with practiced ease. "You'll be out skipping me before long." "Not likely," Rebecca said loyally as they approached. "Pa still holds the record at 7 skips." "Only because the creek was exceptionally calm that day," Elijah demurred, though his pride was evident. Zara gathered Elizabeth into her arms before the toddler could make good on her apparent plan to join the ducks for a swim. "Thank you for watching them, Rebecca. Why don't you go find your friends now? I saw Mary Sullivan by the lemonade stand." The girl's face lit up. "Really? Thanks, Ma." She darted off, the responsibilities of older sisterhood temporarily set aside for the pleasures of 11-year-old friendship. As they made their way back toward the heart of the fair, Zara felt a familiar contentment wash over her. The past 5 years had brought changes and challenges, the joining of their properties into one thriving farm, the addition of 2 more children to their already full house, the inevitable growing pains as the older ones began to mature toward adulthood. Through it all, Elijah had been her steady partner, his love and support unwavering even when they disagreed. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Vaughn," he asked, shifting James to his shoulders as the boy pointed excitedly toward the pie-judging tent. "I was just thinking how fortunate we are," she replied honestly. 9 healthy children, a prosperous farm, a community that's finally accepted us. His smile was gentle as he glanced down at her. "Fortunate, yes, but you built most of this before I ever came back, Zara. Never forget that." "We built it together," she corrected. "All of us." They paused at the edge of the square, watching as their sprawling family enjoyed the festivities, Thomas showing off his marksmanship trophy to some admiring younger boys, Sarah and her friends examining fabric at a merchant's stall, William and Joseph cheering at the horse races, Lily sketching quietly in a corner, Annie running breathlessly from one game to the next. "Remember that day I rode into town and found that mob at your door?" Elijah asked suddenly. "How could I forget? You marched in and claimed 7 children as your family without blinking an eye, he chuckled. Best impulsive decision I ever made. Was it impulsive? She asked curiously. Sometimes I've wondered if you had it planned all along. The claiming them as family part, complete improvisation, he admitted. But coming back to find you, that was always the plan from the moment I heard you were widowed. He shifted James higher on his shoulders as the boy began to drowse. I just didn't expect to find you with 7 children already. And now 9, she said with a smile, bouncing Elizabeth gently as the toddler also began to show signs of afternoon fatigue. And I wouldn't change a single one, he said firmly. Not for all the gold in California. A commotion near the judge's tent drew their attention as Lily came running toward them, her usually solemn face transformed by excitement. Ma, Pa, my drawing won a special prize, she called, waving a blue ribbon. The judge said it shows exceptional promise and he wants to talk to you about art lessons in San Francisco. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Zara exclaimed, genuine pride surging through her. At 10, Lily's talent had blossomed beyond what any of them had expected from the quiet, traumatized child they'd taken in years ago. Elijah swept the girl into a one-armed hug, careful not to dislodge the now sleeping James. I knew you could do it. We'll talk to the judge right away. As Lily led them toward the art exhibition, chattering more animatedly than they'd heard in months, Zara exchanged a glance with Elijah. The unspoken communication that had developed between them over their years together conveyed volumes pride in their daughter's achievement. Determination to support her talent however they could, shared joy in the flourishing of a child who had once been so withdrawn. Later that evening, with the younger children tucked into bed and the older ones settled with books or quiet games, Zara and Elijah sat on their porch in the gathering dusk, a familiar ritual that had endured from their courting days. It was a good day, Elijah observed, his arm draped comfortably around her shoulders. One of many, she agreed, leaning into his warmth. Though I think James might have overindulged in pie, we'll likely be up with him in the night. I'll take the first shift, he offered. You need your rest. His solicitude made her smile. After 9 children, Elijah was still overprotective whenever she showed the slightest sign of fatigue. I'm not made of glass, you know. No, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. You're made of something far stronger. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve rest. She turned her face up to his, studying the beloved features that had become so familiar. The lines at the corners of his eyes deepened by years of sun and laughter. The scar along his jaw that the children loved to hear stories about, the steadfast blue gaze that had never wavered in its devotion. Have I told you today that I love you, Elijah Vaughn? She asked softly. His smile was slow and warm. You have, but I never tire of hearing it. Good, she murmured, leaning up to press her lips to his. Because I plan to keep saying it for at least another 50 years. Only 50. He teased against her mouth. I was hoping for eternity. As the stars began to appear overhead, and the sounds of their large, blended family drifted through the open windows, Zara thought about the long, unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment from a young love interrupted by war and circumstance, through years of separate trials and growth, to that pivotal day when Elijah had ridden back into her life and declared 7 orphan children his family without hesitation. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined in their youth. It was better, richer, fuller, more meaningful than anything they could have planned. A family built on choice rather than obligation, on love freely given rather than duty or convention. In the end, perhaps that was the greatest gift Elijah had given her that day 5 years ago when he faced down the town's disapproval. The recognition that family wasn't about blood or convention, but about commitment and love. About standing up and saying, "These are my people. This is where I belong." As Elijah's arms tightened around her in the gathering darkness, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by the family they had built together. loved by the man who had once ridden into town and claimed them all as his own.